The Merchant of Venice. Long ago there lived in Venice, a town in Italy, a man called Antonio. He was a merchant, owning many ships which traded with distant countries, and he was a good man as well as a rich one. Antonio's greatest friend was a young soldier, Bassanio, who loved a beautiful lady called Portia. But Bassanio was not a wealthy man, and he did not like to ask Portia to marry him, because she was as rich as she was beautiful. At last, however, he asked Antonio to lend him some money, so that he could visit Portia at Belmont, where she lived, and at least find out if she loved him. It happened that at this time all Antonio's ships were at sea, and until they returned he had no money to lend Bassanio. "But go to a moneylender," he said to his friend, "borrow the money you need from him, and tell him that when my ships come in, I will pay him back all that he has lent you." Now, there lived in Venice an old Jew named Shylock. The Jews in those days were the moneylenders of Venice. They lent money, but they forced people to pay so heavily for the loan that the Jews themselves became very rich. Shylock was one of the greediest Jews in Venice. Antonio hated him for his wicked ways, and he had often insulted the Jew and spoken rudely to him. For this reason, Shylock hated Antonio too, and was anxious to revenge the insults. Bassanio, knowing that Shylock was very rich, went to him to borrow the money he needed. Shylock was delighted he would hear from Antonio, and promised to pay him back the loan. He thought that his enemies had given into his hands, him anything for the loan. "But Antonio must pay me back in 3 months," Shylock said, "and just for a joke, he must sign a bond promising that I may cut off a pound of flesh from his body if the money is not paid." Bassanio had no faith in Shylock, and did not like Antonio to make such a terrible promise. But Antonio thought that Shylock was really joking, and he said, "I am indeed content to sign such a promise. Do not be afraid, Bassanio. My ships will return a month before the money is due, and then I shall have 3 times as much as Shylock has lent to you." And Antonio signed the bond. "I do not like this promise," said Bassanio uneasily. But Antonio said again, "You need have no fear. My ships will come home a month before the day." So Bassanio unwillingly took the money, said goodbye to Antonio, and sailed away to Belmont. He took one of his friends with him, a young man named Grishanio. The beautiful Portia lived in a big house in Belmont with her servant companion Nerissa. Her father had died recently, and had left her a great deal of money. He had been a wise old man, and had to protect his daughter from greedy men who might try to marry her because she was so rich. He left Portia 3 boxes. One of the boxes contained her picture, and whoever chose this box was to be Portia's husband. Just before Bassanio arrived from Venice, a king's son came from Africa to visit Portia. This man, Morocco, was powerful and wealthy, and he wished to marry her, but Portia did not love him, and she hoped that he would choose the wrong box. "It is not hard, Nerissa," she confided to her servant. "I cannot choose the man I wish to marry, or refuse those I dislike." "You have plenty of admirers to choose from," Nerissa said. "But do remember a young man from Venice who was once your father's?" "Yes, yes, it was Bassanio. I think that was his name." "True, madam," said Nerissa, "and I think he deserves your love more than any of the others." "I remember him well, and I remember he was worthy of your praise. But I cannot marry him unless he comes and chooses the right box." "Perhaps he will," Nerissa comforted her. "Your father was a wise and virtuous man. I am sure he will have arranged the boxes so that the right man will choose the picture." Nerissa's sensible suggestion made Portia feel more cheerful as she showed the 3 boxes to the dark-skinned African from Morocco. He examined them carefully, and read the words written on the outside of each box. On the gold box was written, "Whoever chooses me shall gain what many men desire." On the silver box was written, "Whoever chooses me shall get as much as he deserves." And on the plain box made of lead was written, "Whoever chooses me must give and risk all that he has." "What many men desire," Morocco said, looking at the golden box. "That must be the fair Portia, and her picture will certainly be inside of the gold box." He opened it, but all he found inside was an ugly skull, and a piece of paper containing the words, "All that shines is not gold. Goodbye." So Morocco sadly said goodbye to Portia, and returned to Africa. The next visitor was the Prince of Aragon, and he too was shown 3 boxes. Aragon was a vain young man with a very high opinion of himself, and he chose the silver box. If I get as much as I deserve, he said, I shall certainly gain the fair Portia. But the box contained nothing but a fool's head and those words, Many fools are hidden behind a silver covering. So begone, sir. The prince, feeling very silly, went away as sadly as Morocco had done. Then Bassanio and Grittanio arrived, and Bassanio begged Portia to permit him to try his luck with the 3 boxes. She was very much afraid that he might choose the wrong box, but she dared not tell him which was the right one. He looked at the box of gold and the box of silver and shook his head. The things which are most beautiful outside are often the ugliest within, he said. I choose the plain black box. Portia was filled with joy as Bassanio opened the box and found inside a lovely picture of her. They arranged to be married at once, and Bassanio's friend Gortinio asked for permission to marry Nerissa at the same time. Their happiness was soon disturbed by bad news. A ship arrived from Venice, bringing a friend of Bassanio called Lorenzo. With Lorenzo his wife Jessica, the beautiful daughter of Shylock the Jew. Shylock had always been harsh and cruel of Jessica, and she knew he would never consent to her marrying Lorenzo first, because he was not a Jew, and secondly because he was a friend of Antonio's. So one night she ran away from her father's house to marry Lorenzo, taking with her a great deal of money and some jewels. They had come to Belmont to escape Shylock's anger, and they brought with him a letter to Bassanio from Antonio. Bassanio read the letter, and he turned so pale that Portia feared that his friend must be dead. What is it, Bassanio? She asked anxiously. You must let me share the bad news that this letter brings. Oh, sweet Portia, said Bassanio, here are some of the most unpleasant words that ever have been written. The letter told him that Antonio's 6 ships, full of riches, had all been wrecked at sea, and Antonio's money had been lost with them. And this was not all. Shylock hated Antonio more than ever since his friend Lorenzo had run away with Jessica. He was so angry at the loss of his daughter and his money that he walked the streets crying, My daughter, my money, my jewels, justice, justice! Find me my money and find me my daughter. And when he heard that all Antonio's ships were lost, he was very glad. Now he could revenge himself on Antonio and all those who loved the brave young merchant. Shylock went to the Duke of Venice and told him of Antonio's bargain and of the letter he had signed. The Duke and many of the merchants tried to persuade Shylock to give up his cruel revenge, but he would not listen to them. Antonio cannot pay the money, said Shylock. He must therefore keep his promise and pay me the pound of flesh. Jessica had heard her father tell his Jewish friends that he would rather have a pound of Antonio's flesh than be paid 20 times the sum that was owed to him. Bassanio was terribly disturbed by the news, and decided that he must return at once to Venice to try to save his friend. Portia had a kind of generous heart, and did not try to prevent his going. Let us be married now, she said, and then you must go to Venice at once. You shall have gold to pay this debt 20 times over, and when it is paid, bring your true friend here. So they were married, and after the ceremony Bassanio and Grittanio set off to Venice. They found that the trial was just beginning. Antonio did not ask for mercy. He knew that Shylock hated him too much to be merciful. Besides, a man must keep his promise, otherwise people would think that the merchant of Venice were not honest men. The Duke of Venice, who was judging the case, begged Shylock to be merciful. Why should I be merciful, said the Jew. I do not love Antonio. Do all men kill the things they do not love? Asked Bassanio angrily. Don't all men want to kill the things they hate? Answered Shylock bitterly. Cat, I will give you twice as much as Antonio owes you, if you will let him go free, Bassanio said. If you offered me 6,000 times more than the amount he owes, I should still ask for my pound of flesh, the Jew replied. How can you hope for a mercy if you show none? Asked the Duke, but Shylock answered violently. I do not want mercy, I want justice. Give me my pound of flesh. He began to sharpen the long knife he had brought with him, feeling that his revenge was very near. But at that moment a messenger came to the Duke with the news that the clever young lawyer had arrived from another town to judge the case. Almost at once the lawyer entered, accompanied by his clerk. They both looked very young, but they brought with them a written introduction from a lawyer friend of the Duke's, who assured him that the young man was well qualified to judge the case. His wisdom was soon shown by the careful questions he asked the Jew. When he heard all that Shylock and Antonio had to say, he began the Jew to be merciful. Why should I be merciful? Tell me that, I shouted Shylock angrily. And the young lawyer made a fine speech, telling Shylock of the value of mercy. Mercy is twice blessed, he said, It blesses him who gives him and him who receives. Great kings are always merciful, and God himself is known to be full of gentleness and mercy. Therefore, Jew, although you ask for justice, I ask you to be merciful." Shylock would not listen. He could think of nothing but revenge, and he refused to take the money. Bassanio offered, although Bassanio said he would give him 10 times the sum he owed. "Come, Shylock," said the lawyer patiently. "Be merciful. Take 3 times the sum, and let him tear up the promise." Shylock still refused, and the lawyer had to admit that his claim was right according to the law of Venice. If the Jew would not be merciful, Antonio must give him a pound of flesh. A wise man came to judgment. "O wise young judge, how I admire you," cried Shylock, bringing out his knife again. "You must prepare yourself for the knife," the lawyer said to Antonio. "O noble judge, O wonderful young man," said Shylock. "Come, open your coat," said the lawyer. Yes, his coat, nearest the heart, noble judge," said Shylock, feeling the sharp edge of his knife. "Are there balances here to weigh the flesh?" asked the young man. "I have them ready," answered Shylock. "Have you called a doctor to stop his wounds in case they bleed to death?" "No," said Shylock. "That is not written in the bond." The young judge asked Antonio if he had anything to say. Antonio told Bassanio that he loved him greatly and was glad to die for his sake, and then he said goodbye. "A pound of this merchant's flesh is yours," said the lawyer to Shylock. "The court agrees." "A pound of this merchant's flesh is yours," said the lawyer to Shylock. "The court agrees, and the law admits it." "Most rightful judge," said the delightful Jew. "And you must cut this flesh from near his heart. The law admits it, and the court agrees." "Most learned judge," said Shylock. "Come, Antonio, prepare yourself." "Wait a little," said the judge. "There is something else. This letter does not promise you 1 drop of blood. Take your pound of flesh, and if you spill 1 drop of blood, you must give all your money and possessions to the state." Now it was Antonio's turn to praise the lawyer. "O learned judge," he cried. "Listen, Shylock, to the learned judge. You ask for justice, and you shall have it," said the lawyer. Then cried Shylock hastily, "Give me the money, Bassanio. Give me 3 times what Antonio owes me, as you would." "Not so fast," the judge. "You have already refused the money. You shall have justice, but nothing else." Finally, shaking with anger, the old Jew asked for the money he had lent Bassanio, and no more, but the judge refused. "Oh, you have not yet finished," he continued. "You, Shylock, are a Jew. According to the laws of Venice, if anyone who is not himself a citizen of Venice tries to take the life of a true citizen, he must be put to death, and his money and property must be shared equally between the state and the man he has tried to kill. You are not a citizen of Venice, and you have tried to kill Antonio. The Duke must decide on your punishment." "I shall show you more mercy than you showed Antonio," said the Duke to the frightened Jew. "I give you your life, but your money must be given to Antonio and the state." Shylock was a defeated man. What could he do? If all of his money was taken from him, "Take my money as well," he cried bitterly. "You take my life anyway if you take the means by which I live." The young judge turned to Antonio and said, "What mercy can you offer him, Antonio?" The kind-hearted Antonio playing the broken old man and said gently to him, "Let him keep his share of the property, but on one condition. When he dies, he must leave all his possessions to his daughter Jessica and her husband." "Are you contented, Shylock? What do you say?" asked the lawyer. "I am content," said Shylock, "and now I pray you give me the leave to go." "I am not well. Send me the papers and I shall sign them." And the old Jew left the court. Antonio and Bassanio were full of gratitude. The clever young judge had asked him to accept the money that Shylock had lent Bassanio, but the judge would not take it, saying he was well paid by their consent. "Then, dear sir," said Bassanio, "take some small gift to remind you of our gratitude. If you insist, the young man, I will take the ring of your fair on your finger." Bassanio hastily drew back his hand, and because the ring was one the Portia had given him, he had promised to her that he would keep it always. He told the judge the ring was of small value, and promised he would buy him a more expensive one instead. But the young man seemed annoyed. "You taught me how to beg," he said, "and now I think you teach me how a beggar should be answered." He said goodbye coldly to Bassanio and went away. When he had gone, however, Antonio persuaded Bassanio to tell the lawyer to have the ring, and Bassanio, regretting his earlier refusal, sent Gaetanio to find a young judge and give it to him. Poor Gaetanio found himself in trouble too, because after Bassanio's ring to the lawyer, he was persuaded by the lawyer's clerk to give him his own ring, a gift to him from Nerissa at their marriage. Bassanio and Gaetanio returned to Belmont, taking Antonio with them. They were full of happiness at the thought of seeing Portia and Nerissa again, but they were a little worried. What would their wives have to say when they noticed that the rings had gone? When Portia looked at Bassanio's hand, she asked him at once what had happened to his ring. He explained, but she seemed very annoyed. He begged her to forgive him, and Antonio told her that Bassanio was not to blame. He had given the ring to the clever lawyer who had saved Antonio's life. I dare swear he will never again break a promise to you, Antonio said. Then give him this ring, said Portia, and tell him to keep it to better the others. To Bassanio's astonishment, she gave him the very same ring that he had given to the judge, and Arissa returned to Antonio the ring which she had given to the lawyer's clerk. You are all amazed, said Portia, laughing at their puzzled faces. But here's a letter. Read it, all of you. There you will find that Portia was the lawyer and Arissa was the clerk. Were you the lawyer? I did not know you, Bassanio asked in amazement. Yes, Portia said. Lorenzo will tell you that I have only returned from Venice. She returned to Antonio. Antonio, you are welcome, she said. I have better news for you than you expect. 3 of your ships have arrived safely back in the harbor, and your money is safe. And so there was great rejoicing at their house at Belmont's, and all was well for Antonio, the brave young merchant of Venice. The end.